So as always, Scripture asks us questions, and today's Scripture is asking us a very important question. We are challenged today to ask ourselves, what is our focus in life? What should it be, and what should it not be? Now, the first reading from Ecclesiastes is one of my favorite readings. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Vanity not in the sense of some pridefulness or some conceit, but vanity in terms of it's vain. All of this is passing away. Why are you chasing all of these things that don't last, that don't exist? And I have a twin sister, and my twin sister and I, when we were kids, if we got money at Christmas or for our birthdays or some other occasion, we'd run down to a convenience store at the end of the street, eager to buy candy or some sweet or something. And we'd always say the same thing to each other, which I think was quite remarkable for a couple of 6-year-olds, which was, let's buy something that lasts, not something that we're going to consume. And in our lives as adults, or soon-to-be adults, there are all sorts of things that we can focus on that are not lasting, that will pass away. For many of us, the focus of our lives is getting through life to pay off our mortgage, or to fill a 401k with money, or to have an IRA or a full pension with health, vision, and dental at the end of our careers. For some of us, our emotions are our possessions. We treat life as a constant attempt to recreate things that have passed, to recreate our youth. You think about the commercials that you see on the news channels for a particular demographic, and there's the couple in their 60s or early 70s who are driving around in their Volkswagen van, and they're taking pills to get thinner and to have a more amorous life with each other and to grow hair and to be 17 again, without recognizing that what they're chasing is something that they will never be able to catch, but it has caught their attention, it has caught their focus. There's something that we can recognize in ourselves when we are focused on the wrong thing. And I suggest to you it's the phrase that you either speak or you hear in your mind that is the I miss. I miss how we were when we were a younger couple. I miss the children when they were younger and in elementary school. I miss having this experience. I miss my first cocktail. I miss my first 4-star meal. Things like that that are passing. If you say that to yourself or you're saying that out loud, stop for a minute and be conscious of that. Be conscious of where that says your focus may be. Now, these things, these objects of our attention, aren't problematic in and of themselves. They're only problematic if they become our focus, if they become our golden calves. Things, money, mortgage, house, family, experiences, those are just tools, and we need to treat them as tools. Staring at a shovel, you might have a shovel that's in your garage that you've never used, but staring at it doesn't dig a hole. Owning a fountain pen collection doesn't write beautiful prose. Having a nice car doesn't get you anywhere on its own. So, as always, if we are to live a Christ-like existence, we must see the world as Christ sees it. And so look at the gospel, look at what he tells us. First, he's asked to arbitrate an inheritance dispute, a focus on what is here and now. Divide up everything, and we see this in a lot of scripture and a lot of the gospels. Divide up my inheritance now. Allocate these things. And Christ sort of, I imagine him kind of smiling patiently and saying, you're asking the wrong question again. So what do we look at? Let's look at Scripture to view the world as Christ views it. We start with the Psalm. Now, I would encourage you, and I love that we read out the pages, I would encourage you before Mass to read the Scriptures, but during Mass to look at those words. We have wonderful lectors, and they do a great job, but look at the words. So from the Psalm, teach us to number our days aright, that we may gain wisdom of heart. God teaches us through the Psalm to recognize that we are finite, but that we're called by him to join the infinite. In Colossians, Paul admonishes, seek what is above, not what is on earth. Put to death the earthly parts of you. Again, Paul is reminding us of Christ's message that all of this is passing away. that it's all temporary, that, to use a $50 word, that it's all ephemeral, it's transient. Focus on what is really important and what lasts forever. And then, of course, Christ in the gospel, stating God's words, tells us, store up treasures to what matters to God. But what is that? What matters to God? Well, previously in prior homilies, I've talked to you about grammar. And every time I say the word grammar, everybody goes, okay, I'm taking a nap now. Last homily, we talked about verbs, the action that we're called to engage in. Today, I want to focus on adverbs, the qualities of our action. And the Catholic Church, rich as it is with all sorts of tradition and all sorts of teaching, has cardinal virtues, right? Aquinas and Augustine write about this. Ambrose writes about this especially. And we look at things like prudence, the ability to make good decisions. We look at justice, how we interact with each other in fairness or in charity. Fortitude is another of the virtues. How do we manage our fears? How do we endure? And temperance, one of the most overlooked virtues these days. How do we control our passions? How do we master what we are drawn to that may not be what God is drawing us to? And what's nice about these ideals is they are like God. They live forever. They're unchangeable. They're eternal. And if we live those virtues, if those virtues inform our actions, we share in the eternal, the infinite. We have found something that lasts. Now, this is a tough thing to expect of us because where do we live? We live in a world that is transient, that is, as Paul puts it, passing away. How can we, in this world in which we inhabit, conceive of these ideals that we can't see, we can't weigh them, we can't measure them, we can't examine them scientifically? They exist, and we recognize that. And there is our consolation. Our ability to conceive of the virtues reassures us that they are proof of the infinite, of the incorruptibility of God, and our ability to hold them in our heads and understand them and know how they are to motivate our actions confirms for us God's presence within us. So how do we apply some of this? How do we make the infinite present through our finite existence? How do we, as Father Alex talked about in previous homilies, how do we project the ideals that are within us? How do we take action? I've referred to this as Catholic virtue signaling. And virtue signaling these days is sort of a conceit, and you're not meant to virtue signal. It's offensive, etc., because there's some degree of pridefulness and some degree of self-absorption about it. But I would suggest to you that Catholic virtue signaling is different altogether. It is virtue expressed in action. And our action out of the virtues, informed by those virtues, is evidence that we are infinite and that the infinite is here and present in the world. And that's wonderful not just for us as a community, but that's wonderful for the world at large to witness and to recognize. But of course, this requires some difficult self-analysis, some self-awareness that we may not have. So I'm going to give you some homework. Everybody rolls their eyes. Oh no, homework. I want you to identify one thing in your homes. Find the most precious thing you have. Maybe it's a childhood toy that you've kept forever. Maybe it's a photograph that somebody gave you, or a prayer card, or something that is super important to you. You're going to cling to that thing until you're put into a coffin and you grasp it down 6 feet below. I want you to give it away. I want you to let it go. Let that thing go, that object go. And for some of us, it might not be actually a physical thing. It might be a habit. It might be an attempt to recapture an experience. Sometimes people talk about alcohol. Well, I'm going to try and, I'm chasing a buzz, so to speak. I want to experience the way I felt when I first met my wife or my husband. I want us to be like that young couple we were when we first met and we were going through that honeymoon period. The thing might not be an object. It could be a broken relationship. that you hold on to, a grudge. It could be a fear. Reflect on that. Reflect on the virtues and think to yourself, what should I let go because it's taking me away from the focus that I'm called to have by Christ? In an open hand, letting something go, either literally or figuratively, is an expression of an open heart from which the virtues that we believe in, that we marinate in, that we get deep within our hearts, flow. It's a reflection of who we are and what our focus is in life. And I pray that God gives us all the strength, the courage to focus on the invisible and the infinite and to give up what doesn't last.